Hi everybody! Today I want to show you how to loom an easy hat for beginners. This is a super easy hat for beginners, and I know because I was a beginner when I made up this pattern. It has style, and it definitely doesn't reveal how easy it is to actually make. I started making Christmas gifts. That is why I have started doing my hats. That is also why I want to do this video, in case you want to make some chunky funky hats for Christmas too. So a few months ago I made a video on how to loom for beginners, and I made dishcloths in that video. And I showed a picture of actually my blue hat, which is the first hat that I made, and everybody seemed to love my hat. Well, since everybody has suggested that I make a video on how to do that hat, I am making this video. I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who has given feedback. It means so much to us. A special shout out goes to Cassie, Deandra, Jeanette, Mary, Tammy, and my sister-in-law Heather for inspiring and encouraging me to do this video. This is the kit that I got for Christmas last year, and I know that a lot of hats call for a 40 peg loom, but mine did not come with a 40 peg loom. Mine came with a 36 peg loom, which it's just a little bit smaller, and it seems to work just fine. This is the kind of yarn that I use. I use the Red Heart yarn. You could pick whatever colors that you would like to use for your hat. For the brim of my hat, I use 2 different colors of yarn mixed together, and I just put them together like this, and that is how we start. Now the only stitch that we are going to use for this hat is the knit stitch. It is the easiest to count, and it is super easy to do, and I love doing the knit stitch. Now let me show you how easy it is to do the knit stitch. Let's start out by loosely tying a simple knot and putting it on the outside peg. Then pull the knot until it is tightened. Always start the first stitch of each row on the same peg. This is the peg I start on. When I first started looming, I sometimes didn't pay attention to the peg I started off on, and by the end of a few rows, I noticed that it threw me way off on my pattern. Once you get used to always starting on the same peg, it becomes second nature, and it will help you with your future projects. Now, I simply start wrapping each peg with both strings of yarn like this. I keep wrapping until I get back to the peg where I started. Now that I am back at my first peg, I start pushing all of the wrapped yarn on the pegs down on the loom like this, in order to give the next wrapped row room at the top. Then I start wrapping each peg again at the top, and then stop when all the pegs are wrapped twice. Now that all of the pegs have 2 rows of loops on each of them, I use my hook and start pulling the bottom loop up over the top loop and the top of the peg like this. This will leave only 1 loop on each peg. It is important to be aware of how tight you wrap your yarn around your pegs. If you wrap them too tight, then it will make it hard for you to pull the bottom loop over the top of the peg. It will also take you longer to do each row. If you make it too loose, then your top loop will pull off when you pull the bottom loop over it. So practice wrapping your pegs with a medium tightness. You have just completed your first row of knit stitches. Now push all of your loops on your pegs down to the bottom of your loom so you can do a second row. Be sure to start wrapping your second row on your regular starting peg. I continue wrapping until all the pegs have 2 loops. Then I pull the bottom loop over the top all the way around. This is the only stitch that you will be using for the whole hat. This first 2-color section will be the brim of your hat.
The brim of the hat gets 20 rows.
When you finish 20 rows for the brim, be sure to count the rows before you do the next steps. Then push your work down on your loom. Let me show you on my brown hat how to tie off your beginning strings. Separate the two strings and push one string through an end loop, and then tie the two strings together like this. I will tuck the strings inside of the brim in a second. Pull the brim up through the middle of the loom. Follow down the straight line from the peg to the end and grab the end stitch. Put the end stitch over top of the peg. Grab the next end stitch and put that on the next peg, and so on, until all the stitches are on the peg. This is how I tuck the end strings. Once all the loops are on the pegs, we pull all the bottom loops up and over the top. Yay, our brim is all done! Now I will show you how to do the first stripe.
Stripe number 1 gets 10 rows.
My first stripe will be tan, so I have to change my black string to tan. I cut the black string and leave enough room to tie a knot. We will use both ends of our spool of yarn, so grab the end of your yarn spool that isn't being used and tie it onto the black yarn string. I try to tie the knot as close to the loom as I can get it. I tie it twice to be sure it doesn't come undone. So what I do is I get an old coffee container and I use this end that comes right out of the middle and I stick it down into the coffee container, and that way I can pull that end out from underneath of it and straight out. This end, which wraps around and around, will not get tangled up with this end because it is sticking down in the container and it comes from around the top, and it makes it super easy for when you are looming and you don't have to worry about it rolling across the floor or getting into knots. Now let's push all our work down on our loom and start wrapping so we can knit our 10 rows to create our first stripe. This is how I count my rows, so I am sure that I have 10 rows. Now I cut my strings, get both ends of my black spool, and tie them onto the tan strings. Yay, we are now ready to do stripe number 2.
Stripe number 2 gets 8 rows.
I think you have the hang of it. We continue to do this same process until we get all of our rows done. Let's do stripe number 3.
Stripe number 3 gets 8 rows.
Next up is stripe number 4. Stripe number 4 gets 6 rows. Keep up the great job. This is stripe number 5.
Stripe number 5 gets 6 rows.
Notice how the stripes get smaller as we go. This is stripe number 6.
Stripe number 6 gets 4 rows.
We are getting closer to the end. This is stripe number 7.
Stripe number 7 gets 4 rows.
2 stripes left. This is stripe number 8. Stripe number 8 gets 2 rows. Is that bad?
Yeah, it's bad.
Bad. Yay, this is our last stripe. This is stripe number 9. Stripe number 9
Gets 2 rows.
Yay, we are done with our stripes. Now, let's finish our hat off and make a pom-pom. The next thing I do is cut my strings. Be sure to cut the strings long so that it is easy to stitch your loom loops together. Next, I thread my yarn needle. I push all the loops on the loom to the center of the pegs. This makes it easy to get the needle under each loop. Now I push my needle up and under each stitch all the way around the loom, like this. Once all the loops are sewn together, I use my hook to lift all the loops off of the pegs. Now I pull my string to make the loops pull together. I push my needle through the top of the hat and flip the hat inside out. Then I sew the top until it is secure. Now let me show you how I make my pom-pom. The first thing I do is cut 2 long yarn strings so they will be easy to find amongst the shorter pom-pom strings. I use a hardback book to make my pom-pom. The book is 8.5 inches long. I lay the book on top of one of my long cut strings like this. I lay the other string across the top, and then I tie a bow on each side of the book with the strings. I tuck the floppy ends of my bows under as much as I can so that they don't get in the way while I wrap my pom-pom. Now I start wrapping the yarn around the book like this until I feel that the yarn is thick enough to make a good pom-pom. I cut the yarn when I am done. Now I untie my long string bows on the sides. I then tie the long strings across the wrapped yarn on both sides of the book like this. I cut all the strings on one end of the book and then cut the strings on the other end to make 2 bunches of yarn. Now I find 1 yarn string on each bunch of yarn and tie them together like this. I flip the pom-pom over and tie the other 2 strings on the other side too. I tie my strings until I feel like my pom-pom will stay together nicely. I like my pom-pom to have a long and floppy kind of style. That is why I choose to do my pom-poms like this. Now it is time to attach the pom-pom to our hat. I take 2 of the long pom-pom strings and tuck them into the top of the hat and pull it through to the other side. I do the same thing with the other 2 strings. Now I tie the pom-pom strings to the hat strings on the inside of the hat. When I feel that the pom-pom is secure, I cut the long strings off. The last thing I do is shape my pom-pom to the way I like it by cutting it to my desired style. Now I also want to give one more shout out, and that is to MNOPXS2. And the reason why I want to give her a shout out is because she has helped me so much with any looming questions or crocheting questions that I may have. And she is such an inspiration to me, and I am going to leave a link to her channel and her blog down below. While I was working on my hats, I got sidetracked and I came up with another Christmas project. Isn't it cute? It's a snowman Christmas ornament, and I made it with my smallest loom. So easy and fun. Maybe I'll make a video on how to do this. I hope that this video inspires you to make a funky chunky hat. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below and I will get to you as soon as I can. I would also love to hear from you if you give it a try. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye! I think my daughter's gonna look like Where's Waldo? People are gonna come up to her and go, "Where's Waldo?" Her hair's like flippy up.
That's supposed to be like that.
Oh!
I got hat hair in my mouth. Cat hair? Hat hair. Don't lose my pimple. I flip my hat back and forth. I flip my hat back and forth.